I stood at the threshold of my life, finally ready to walk away. After 40 years of marriage, after decades of sacrifices, I was letting go of the one thing I had clung to for far too long. Harold, my husband, my partner, had never seen me, not really. And today, I was done. It was early morning when I woke up, the faint smell of spices wafting through the house as I stepped into the kitchen. But there was something wrong. Everything felt like it was being staged for a camera, each detail meticulously set, but without heart. My daughter, Emily, had decided to celebrate my birthday early as part of her latest social media venture, The Ideal Family Life. It wasn't a celebration for me. It was content. I realized, as I looked around at the food laid out before me, heavy, rich dishes I couldn't even chew, that no one had truly thought about what I could eat. Not once had they considered me. I had given everything to this family. For years, I had worked tirelessly to maintain this home, to make sure everyone had what they needed, while silently diminishing my own desires, my own dreams. I gave up parts of myself to keep them whole, to keep everything running. But now, at 68, I understood that it was never about me. My needs had always come last, and I had let them until now. As I looked at the carefully arranged plates on the table, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. A birthday celebration should have been a moment of connection, of warmth, but instead, it felt like a performance, something to share with her followers, not a moment for me, and suddenly, everything became clear. I wasn't just being neglected, I was being used. The truth, harsh and cold, settled over me like a heavy fog. The realization stung, but it was also freeing. I could stop pretending. It was time to let go. Over the years, I had convinced myself that everything I was doing was for them. Every meal prepared, every inch of this house polished to perfection, was my way of giving back to the family I had dedicated my life to. I had watched my children grow, my husband get older, and yet, somehow, I always remained in the background, a silent pillar holding up a family that seemed to barely notice I was there. As the years wore on, the days became quieter, simpler. I no longer cared about keeping up with the latest fashion trends or whether my jewelry sparkled just so. These things once held meaning to me, but now they seemed irrelevant, unimportant in the grand scheme of life. I didn't need the frills. All I needed was a sense of purpose, of belonging, of feeling like I mattered to someone. But as I stood in the kitchen, watching Emily prepare another perfectly staged meal, I realized that none of that was ever going to come. This year's birthday felt different. It wasn't like the years before, when Harold and I would quietly mark the day, just the two of us, with a simple meal and an unspoken acknowledgement of the time we'd spent together. No, this time, it was an event, a performance. The food was all laid out before me, lobster drenched in spices, roast meat sizzling on the table, dishes I could barely stomach, let alone chew. But Emily, with her ever-expanding following on social media, had orchestrated this. She was doing it for the camera, not for me. I knew about her videos how she'd taken to portraying the ideal family life, the doting daughter, always showing the world how much she cared for me. I had watched her carefully construct these images, these moments of familial love that, when captured on film, seemed so perfect. The smiles, the laughter, the love. But behind the lens, I had learned the painful truth. It wasn't about me. It was about building a brand, creating an image. Mom, don't you remember? We're celebrating your birthday today. Emily laughed as she sliced through the onions with her usual precision, her eyes never meeting mine. I have to post the video on Monday when everyone's online. It's perfect timing. I hesitated for a moment. My real birthday was next week, not today, but I didn't want to seem ungrateful. An early celebration wouldn't hurt. I thought, so. I smiled, although it felt strained. I looked at the table food that seemed rich and overbearing, food I couldn't enjoy. But they had made it for me, hadn't they? Or was it for the video when Emily had been born? I was 35 in age, considered late for pregnancy back then. Harold, the only child in his family, had been eager for a son. But when Emily came into the world, there was no joy, just polite acceptance. No one had been there for me, not the way I needed. I had given birth to her, my body exhausted, but no one cared whether I was recovering. Even the most basic care felt like an afterthought. I remember chewing stale bread, drinking overly sweet juice, and my body weakening. It was during those days that my teeth began to fail, and by the time I reached 60, I had no choice but to get dentures. A few years ago, I had considered dental implants, but the cost was astronomical, nearly $4,000 per tooth. And when I mentioned it, Harold made his thoughts clear. You really want to shove those metal pieces in your mouth? That's disgusting. Your teeth are messed up because you didn't take care of them. Look at me. I'm 2 years older, and I can still eat anything. Emily had chimed in too. Mom, dentures are so much easier at your age. Why waste money on implants when you could save it for Noah's college fund? And so I let it go. I told myself they were right. At my age, I should focus on the next generation, not on indulging myself. But over the years, even the dentures became a struggle. They didn't fit right anymore. I had to nibble my way through every bite, cautious, careful, and constantly aware of my limitations. Looking at the spread on the table, rich, spicy dishes that I could hardly chew, something inside me snapped. Was Emily simply being thoughtless? Did she forget I couldn't eat half of what was laid before me? Or worse, was it that no one in this family had ever truly cared about what I could eat or what I liked? They didn't care. Not really. Not in the way I cared about them. Not in the way I had spent years caring for them. As I stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had been left unsaid, Harold walked through the door. He always seemed to time his arrival perfectly, coming in just as the chaos of the kitchen died down, as though he'd been part of a rehearsed scene. He entered without a word, his eyes glancing at the food, his hands empty, no flowers, no gifts, just him, looking at the spread and offering a casual compliment to Emily. This is quite the setup. Huh. Your mom's really getting the royal treatment today. Don't remember you making this kind of fuss on my birthday. His voice was light, dismissive, and in that moment, I realized something profound. Harold had never really seen me. Not in all the years we had spent together. I had been a background figure in his life, something to manage, something to control. And in that moment, I knew that everything I had believed in about love, about family, had been a lie. As I stood there, the anger began to rise. It wasn't the anger of someone who had been wronged by a single incident. It was the slow, simmering anger of someone who had been quietly overlooked for years. Years of giving, of caring, of sacrificing, and yet receiving nothing in return. Nothing but cold indifference. And so, I made a decision. I didn't want to play this charade anymore. I didn't want to pretend that everything was okay, that I was just grateful for whatever crumbs they decided to throw my way. I wanted something more. I needed to reclaim my dignity, my life, my voice. I wasn't going to be a backdrop in their perfect staged family anymore. I set my teacup down, picked up my chopsticks, and let them fall onto the table. My eyes met Harold's, and I spoke, my voice calm but sharp. So, Harold, where's the orange cake I asked you to pick up? The room froze. Even the clatter of Noah's cartoon sounds seemed out of place. Where's the cake? I repeated, feeling the weight of the words. The simple wish I had asked for, the one thing that had mattered to me, my birthday cake. As the words lingered in the air, a strange silence enveloped the room. My simple request for the cake, the one thing I had hoped for, seemed to cut through the carefully constructed facade of family life. Harold blinked, his eyes filled with something. Was it confusion or was it annoyance? It didn't matter. The truth had been laid bare. This was all a performance. For years, I had been living in the background of their lives, unnoticed, unappreciated. And now, when I finally spoke up, they didn't even seem to understand why it mattered. Harold shrugged, as if dismissing my request. Oh, the cake, I did go to pick it up, but I ran into Ruby on the way. She said she was craving it, so I gave it to her. He said, his tone so casual it was almost insulting. It's just a cake. I'll get you another one tomorrow if it's that important. His words hit me like a slap, and I felt my chest tighten. Ruby, of course. It wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about keeping her happy. Ruby, the woman who had slowly but surely slinked into our lives, taking my place without a single word of gratitude or acknowledgement. She was always so gracious, so easy to love. But I had given everything for this family, and they had tossed me aside for her. Now, even the smallest of my wishes, the birthday cake, couldn't compete with her whims. I didn't let it go. I couldn't. It's my birthday today, I said, each word laced with a quiet, burning anger. Shouldn't there be a cake for me? I asked for that cake. Harold, I've been asking for it for months. My voice was steady, but underneath, the fury was rising. Look, Sylvia, Harold began, his voice tinged with impatience. It's just a cake. You're overreacting. I don't understand why you're making such a fuss. His tone was dismissive, like he had heard this kind of thing from me before, like I was just being unreasonable. But this time, I couldn't let it slide. This time, I had had enough. It wasn't just about the cake anymore. It was about everything, the years of neglect, the dismissals, the sacrifices I had made that no one had ever cared about. It was about the fact that my needs, my desires, my very existence had been invisible to them for so long. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. You never cared about what I wanted. You've never really cared. You've only ever cared about what's convenient for you and for Ruby. The words slipped out before I could stop them. It was as if a dam had broken, and everything I had been holding in for years rushed out in a single, sharp stream. Emily, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. She looked between Harold and me, her face flickering with frustration. She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't going to let her. Not now, not anymore. I'm tired. Emily, I said, my voice softer now, but still firm. I'm tired of pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I'm tired of playing this role, this part of the loving, doting mother and grandmother. But when the camera's off, when the lights are dimmed, none of you really care about me. You care about the image. You care about the story you're telling, but you don't care about the person who's been here, in the background, making it all happen. There was a long pause. The weight of my words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as though the entire house had fallen into stillness, a heavy, oppressive silence that echoed through the walls. Finally, Emily sighed, her face hardening into something I hadn't seen before. "Mom, can you just stop?" she snapped. "You're ruining everything. This is important to me. I've worked so hard on this video, on this perfect family image. Don't you understand? People are watching. My followers are watching." It was as though a knife had pierced my chest. The coldness in her voice, the way she dismissed my feelings as if they were insignificant compared to her followers, hit me harder than anything Harold had said. It was the truth I had feared all along. I wasn't important to them. Not really. "You know," I said slowly, my voice cutting through the silence, "I used to believe that if I just kept giving, kept making things better for everyone else, they would eventually see me. They would eventually care. But now I see it for what it is. They never cared. They just used me to fill the roles they needed me to play." Harold shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't respond. Instead, his eyes flickered to Emily, as if looking for validation. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not anymore. "You've never asked me what I like. Harold, you've never asked me what I want. You've never even thought to. You just assumed that I'd be fine with whatever you decided, and look where that's gotten us." My voice shook with emotion, but I kept going. "You and Emily, you've made your lives, your plans, without ever asking me what I needed, what I wanted. And now, here we are. You've built your ideal family, but it's not real. It's just a story, and I'm done being a part of it." The words were out, and I could feel the weight of them. A lifetime of sacrifice, of being the good wife, the perfect mother, the quiet, invisible presence in the background. It was all gone now, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't going to play along anymore. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady, my heart finally clear. "I'm done being the backdrop to your perfect story. I'm done." There was a moment of silence. Harold looked at me, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. Emily's face was red with frustration, her hands clenched into fists, and just like that, I knew. I had said everything I needed to say. I had finally spoken my truth. The silence in the room grew heavier, suffocating in its intensity. The weight of my words still hung in the air, thick and unspoken. I had said what I needed to say, but the reaction from Harold and Emily was far from what I had expected. Harold, who had spent the past few decades controlling every aspect of my life, seemed taken aback, his expression faltering. But it was Emily who truly caught my attention. She stood there, her face reddening with anger, her lips trembling, as if trying to hold back something. Was it guilt, regret, or was it just the realization that she couldn't control this situation the way she controlled everything else? "Mom, can't you just let it go?" Emily snapped, her voice rising. "Why do you always have to make everything so complicated? You're ruining everything. You're ruining my birthday video, my chance to build something real for once. Can't you just be a part of it?" Her words stung more than I had anticipated. I thought I had grown immune to her criticisms, her selfishness. But in that moment, something inside me snapped, a final thread that had been holding me together in this facade of family love. "No, Emily," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I can't just let it go. Not anymore. For years, I have let you take the stage while I silently stayed behind. For years, I have put your happiness, your image, your life before my own. But now, I'm done. You want me to be a part of this perfect image, this fabricated version of a happy family. I'm not playing along anymore. You've never really seen me, Emily. You've only ever seen what you wanted me to be, the person who stood behind the scenes and made sure everything looked perfect. But that's not me, not anymore. The words left my mouth before I could even fully process them. The weight of them felt strange, freeing, almost like a burden had been lifted from my shoulders. For so long, I had been afraid to confront the truth, afraid of what it might do to the delicate balance we had all tried to maintain. But now, the truth was out in the open, and there was no turning back. Harold shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his face turning red. He was clearly angry, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Was it guilt remorse, or was it just frustration that I had finally stopped playing by his rules? You think I don't care about you? Harold asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. For 40 years, Sylvia, I've been here. I've worked hard to give you everything. I've done everything for this family. And now you're telling me that none of it matters. His words were meant to cut, to make me feel guilty. But they didn't. Not anymore. No. Harold, I replied, my voice steady. I'm telling you that it's not enough. It was never enough. All those years, you never really saw me. You never saw the sacrifices I made, the pieces of myself I gave up just to keep everything together. You didn't see me. Harold, you saw the role I played. The perfect wife, the perfect mother. But I'm not a role, and I'm done pretending that I am. Harold's face twisted in frustration. You're being ridiculous. After everything I've done, after everything we've been through, you want to just throw it all away over a stupid cake. The words felt hollow, empty, coming from him. The cake was never the issue. The issue was that I had spent my life pretending, and now I was finally done. Done with the pretense, done with the sacrifices, done with the role I had played for so long. I turned to Emily, who was now standing with her arms crossed, her lips pressed tightly together. You don't get it, do you? I said softly. This whole thing, this perfect family life you're trying to create, it's not real. It's a lie. And I've been living that lie for far too long. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended in the space between us. Emily's face twisted, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of vulnerability in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she lowered her gaze to the floor, as if ashamed. For a moment, the room was silent, and in that silence, I realized something. I had spent so many years trying to make everything right, trying to fill a role that wasn't truly mine, trying to please everyone else. But in doing so, I had lost myself, and now I was finding myself again. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be pretty, but it was mine. This life, my life, was mine to shape, mine to live. Finally, I spoke again, my voice softer but resolute. I don't need any more of your perfect moments, your staged family celebrations. I don't need any of it. What I need is to be seen, to be heard, to finally live my life the way I've always deserved to. Harold and Emily stood there, silent, unsure of what to say next. But I didn't need them to say anything. I had said everything I needed to say. With a calm, steady breath, I stood up, pushed my chair back, and walked toward the door. The air felt lighter, as if the weight of years of silence had been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was free. I didn't look back as I left the room, leaving behind the family, the facade, the life I had known for so long. It was time for me to start over, to live for myself, to find my own peace. And that was enough. As the last words left my mouth, I felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. I had never imagined that this moment would come, but here it was. The long years of silence, of pretending, of swallowing my own desires for the sake of family, were finally over. But as I walked away from the table, my heart was strangely heavy, not with regret, but with a deep, quiet understanding. I had expected some kind of backlash, some furious words from Harold or Emily, perhaps even a tearful plea for reconciliation. But none of that came. They stood there, frozen, their eyes glued to the table, as if they didn't know how to react to a woman who had finally found her voice. The power dynamics had shifted, and neither of them was prepared for it. I didn't care about their reactions. For once, I didn't care if they were disappointed in me. I had spent my whole life caring about what they thought, about what they needed. And now I was done. I was done with the role of the dutiful wife, the perfect mother, the one who always kept everything together, no matter the cost to myself. I walked into the hallway, feeling the cool air of the house against my skin. For a moment, I thought about the years we had spent here, raising Emily, celebrating holidays, fighting over small things, making up after our arguments. There had been love, at least at some point, hadn't there? But now, it felt like the love had faded into something else, a hollow version of what it used to be. I couldn't remember the last time Harold and I had shared a moment that wasn't weighed down by some unspoken tension, some unresolved bitterness. As I reached the door, my thoughts shifted to the life I had imagined when I was younger. I had always believed that once the children grew up and no longer needed me, once Harold and I could finally relax and enjoy our time together, life would be fulfilling. But here I was, in my late 60s, standing at the threshold of a new chapter, and I realized with startling clarity that life had never been about my happiness. It had always been about theirs. Stepping outside into the cool air, I felt the weight of everything I had given up for the sake of this family. My body had carried the burden of their needs, their expectations, for far too long. But now, as I took that first step away from the house, I realized something powerful. I was finally free. Free from their judgments, free from their indifference, free from the suffocating weight of their demands. I walked slowly, letting the quiet of the evening settle over me. The streets were calm, empty, except for the soft rustling of the trees in the breeze. I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease as I walked further, leaving behind the house that had once been my home, the place where I had spent decades trying to keep everything together. I didn't know where I was going, and that was okay. For the first time in years, I wasn't following someone else's plan. I wasn't trying to fit into a mold that didn't suit me anymore. I didn't need to have all the answers right now. What I needed was space to breathe, space to be myself, space to finally take care of the one person I had neglected for so long, me. The next few days passed in a blur. I found myself at my mother's old house, a small, modest place that had once been filled with the sounds of laughter and the scent of fresh bread baking in the oven. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It felt like a refuge, a place where I could start over without the weight of expectations pressing down on me. I spent the first day cleaning, not out of necessity, but because it felt good. The act of wiping away the dust, of scrubbing the floors until they shone, was almost therapeutic. It was a simple, grounding task that helped me feel more connected to myself than I had in years. I didn't rush the process. There was no need. I took my time, letting the house slowly come back to life, just as I was starting to do. In the evenings, I would sit by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and I'd think about all the things I had yet to do. There was so much to explore, so much I had put on hold for the sake of family, for the sake of keeping everything intact. But now, everything was different. Now, it was my turn, my time to discover what made me happy, what brought me peace. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of my mother's house, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked it up anyway. It was Emily. "Mom," she said, her voice tentative, almost fragile. "I know things have been complicated, but I wanted to apologize. I've been thinking about everything you said, and I realize now how wrong I've been. I've been selfish, focused on my own image instead of seeing you for who you are. I'm sorry. I never should have treated you like that." Her words hung in the air, unexpected and raw. I had spent years waiting for this moment, hoping for some kind of recognition, some acknowledgement of the years I had given to this family. But now, as I listened to her apology, I felt no rush to forgive. I wasn't angry, but I was weary. I had given enough. Now, it was time to give to myself. "I appreciate your apology, Emily," I said quietly, my voice steady. "But I need time to heal, time to figure out who I am without all the noise, without the expectations. I can't just slip back into the role I used to play. I'm not that woman anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "I understand. Mom, I really do. I'm just glad you're okay. Take the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of emotions. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a step, a small, important step toward healing, toward rebuilding the bond we had lost over the years. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of the past beginning to lift, piece by piece. It was a slow process, but I was finally taking control of my own life, and that was enough. The days after I left the house were strangely peaceful. The weight of the years I had spent under the same roof with Harold and Emily slowly began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. I had spent so many years trying to fit into a role, trying to make myself smaller to accommodate their needs and expectations. But now, standing on my own, I felt a freedom I hadn't known I was missing. In the weeks that followed, I focused on settling into my mother's old house. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It wasn't grand or luxurious like the house I had left behind, but it was comfortable. More importantly, it was a space where I could breathe, where I could finally live for myself without anyone else's agenda hanging over me. I had no clear plans, no specific path to follow, but that was okay. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the pressure to figure everything out all at once. I spent my days cleaning and organizing, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was something soothing about the routine of it all, the rhythm of sweeping the floors, wiping down the counters, folding the laundry. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me a sense of purpose. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I was doing it for me. In the evenings, I would sit in the living room, sipping tea and looking out the window. The world outside seemed so vast, so full of possibility. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, nothing like the constant hum of activity and expectation I had left behind. I had so many years ahead of me, so much time to fill with new experiences. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt hopeful. But as much as I tried to focus on myself, there was still a part of me that couldn't completely let go of the past. The memories of my marriage, of the years spent raising Emily and trying to make everything perfect, still lingered. I often found myself thinking about what might have been, about the moments I had sacrificed in the name of family. And sometimes, I even wondered if it was too late to rebuild the connection I had lost with Emily. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, sipping a cup of tea, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see Emily standing there, her face pale and tired, her eyes red from crying. "Mom," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, letting her enter. She looked different, worn down, as if the weight of the world had been pressing down on her. I hadn't seen her like this before. She had always been so confident, so sure of herself. But now she looked like someone who had been broken by the very thing she had once sought to control. "I'm sorry," she whispered as she sat down on the couch, her hands wringing together nervously. "I don't know where to start. I don't even know what to say." I sat down beside her, giving her the space to speak. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly listening, truly seeing her. She wasn't the perfect daughter I had always tried to mold her into. She was human, flawed, just like me. And in that moment, I realized that I had been waiting for her to see me, but I hadn't truly seen her either. "I know I've been awful to you, Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I've been so focused on building this image of the perfect family, of showing everyone how great my life is. I was so caught up in it all, and I never stopped to think about what you really needed. I didn't see you. Mom, not really. I took you for granted, and now I realize how wrong I was." Her words hit me harder than I had expected. For so long, I had longed for this kind of acknowledgement, for her to finally see me, to understand what I had given up. But now, as I listened to her, I felt a mixture of emotions. There was a sense of relief, yes, but there was also a deep sadness. I couldn't help but wonder, was it too late? Could we ever truly rebuild what we had lost? "I've been trying to be perfect," Emily continued, her eyes searching mine, "but I've lost so much in the process. I lost you, and I don't know how to fix that. I don't know if I can, but I want to try. Mom, I really do. I don't want to live in this fake world anymore. I want to come back to you, to the real us." I didn't respond right away. I needed time to process everything she had said. My heart ached for the daughter I had lost, for the years we had spent drifting apart. But there was also a part of me that knew this was the beginning of something new. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. "I'm not sure what the future holds, Emily," I said softly, my voice steady. "I can't promise that things will be the same as they were, but I'm willing to try. For both of us." She looked at me, her eyes filled with hope. For the first time in a long time, I saw the daughter I had always wanted to see, the one who cared about me, who saw me as more than just a background character in her life. And in that moment, I realized that the journey I had started wasn't just about finding myself. It was about finding a way back to the people who mattered most to me. It wouldn't be easy. There would be bumps along the way, moments of doubt, moments of pain, but it was a journey worth taking. After all, I had spent so many years trying to make things work for everyone else. Now, it was time to make things work for me, and maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to make things work for Emily, too. As the days passed after my conversation with Emily, a part of me felt conflicted. I had spent years keeping everything together, sacrificing so much for the sake of the family, and yet now, as I stood in the quiet of my mother's old house, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, uncertainty. Was it too late to rebuild the relationship with Emily? Could I ever truly regain the closeness we once had? Or had the years of neglect and misunderstanding irrevocably changed us? I didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to rush. I had spent so many years putting others first, giving everything I had to my family, and it had taken a toll. Now, I was learning to slow down. I was learning that it was okay not to have everything figured out. That was a strange kind of freedom, a freedom that I hadn't known I needed. The mornings were quiet here. There was no rush, no sense of urgency like there had been in my old house. I woke up when I was ready, drank my coffee slowly, and spent time organizing my thoughts. I began to focus on what I wanted, not what everyone else expected from me. It was in the small things, the way the sunlight filtered through the curtains, the peace that settled over the room as I worked on my sewing, the satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. These were the things that brought me joy now. Not the drama of trying to fit into a role that never really suited me. In the evenings, I would sit outside and watch the stars. The quiet of the night was a balm for my soul, and I often found myself reflecting on how far I had come. The past, with all its pain and regrets, no longer felt like a weight I had to carry. I had let go of it, piece by piece, and with every breath, I felt lighter. But the quiet also gave me space to think about Emily. I had forgiven her, in my heart, for the way she had treated me in the past. I had let go of the bitterness that had built up over the years. But it wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about rebuilding trust. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight. It would take time, patience, and a willingness to see each other for who we truly were, not the roles we had been playing for so long. One day, Emily called again. She hadn't visited in a while, and I had to admit that I had missed her. I hadn't expected things to go back to normal so quickly, but I had hoped that, eventually, we could find our way back to each other. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot," she said on the phone, her voice quieter this time. "I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've hurt you, but I want to do better. I want to be the daughter you deserve." I paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. For years, I had longed for this acknowledgement, this desire to make things right. But it wasn't just about her saying the right things. It was about showing up. It was about putting in the effort to rebuild the trust that had been broken. "I appreciate that, Emily," I replied gently. "I really do. But it's not enough to just talk about it. We need to show each other, day by day, that we're willing to put in the work, that we're willing to be honest, to be real with each other." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her thinking, processing. I knew this wasn't easy for her. It wasn't easy for me, either. But we both needed to face the truth that we had let so much go unsaid for so long. And now it was time to start being honest with each other. I understand, she finally said, her voice soft but sincere. I'm ready, Mom. I'm ready to do the work. That was all I needed to hear. It wasn't going to be perfect. There would be bumps along the way, moments of doubt, but the willingness to try on both our parts was the first step, and that was something worth holding on to. A few days later, Emily came over. We sat together in the living room, the space between us still a little wide, but the air lighter than it had been before. I didn't have all the answers, and neither did she, but we were willing to try. We talked not about the past, not about the mistakes, but about the future, what we both wanted, what we needed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were seeing each other clearly. It was a slow, steady process. There were moments when I felt like we were still so far apart, but then there were moments when I saw glimpses of the daughter I had missed, the one who cared, who truly saw me. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about moving forward together. But with eyes wide open, as the weeks passed, I began to see Emily more often. She brought Noah over for visits, and we started to rebuild the connection we had lost. We cooked meals together, something we hadn't done in years. We laughed, we talked, and sometimes we sat in comfortable silence, just enjoying each other's presence. There was no need to fill the space with words. The connection was enough. And through all of it, I began to heal, not just from the years of neglect and hurt, but from the weight of trying to please everyone, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. I had started to let go of the past, piece by piece, and in its place, something new was growing. It was a life I had chosen for myself, a life where I was seen, where I mattered, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. A few months had passed since I had left my old life behind. The initial sense of relief I felt in the quiet of my new home had gradually given way to something deeper and unexpected peace. It was a peace that came from stepping away from the chaos, from letting go of the roles I had been playing for decades. The world had felt so heavy before, but now each day seemed a little lighter. I spent my mornings tending to the small garden in my backyard, watching the flowers bloom in quiet satisfaction. There was no rush, no obligation, just the simple joy of doing things for myself in my own time. But while I was finding my footing in this new life, there was still one thing that weighed heavily on my heart. It wasn't just the memories of my marriage or the years I had spent feeling invisible. It was the knowledge that, even after everything, Harold and Emily still saw me as someone to be managed, someone who was there to fill the gaps when they needed me. They hadn't truly understood me, and now, as I began to see myself more clearly, I wondered if they ever would. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room sipping my tea, I received a call from Emily. I hadn't expected to hear from her so soon after our last conversation, and I was hesitant to pick up. But I did, hoping that this time things might be different. Mom. Emily's voice sounded strained, hesitant. I know things have been complicated, but I need to talk to you. Can I come over? I paused, feeling a tightness in my chest. Of course, I replied. Come over whenever you're ready. When Emily arrived, she looked different than the last time we had spoken. There was no anger in her eyes, no impatience. She seemed vulnerable, uncertain in a way I hadn't seen before. She sat down across from me, wringing her hands together, clearly struggling to find the right words. Mom, she began, her voice shaky. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how we've never really understood each other, how I've never really seen you. I was so focused on my own life, on what I thought was important, that I didn't stop to realize what you needed. I didn't stop to see you. I'm sorry. I've hurt you, and I regret it. Her words hit me harder than I had expected. They were raw, real, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. It wasn't the perfect apology I had always imagined, but it was enough. It was a start. I know I've made mistakes, and I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. She continued, her voice growing steadier. I've been trying so hard to build this image of what a perfect family should look like. But in doing that, I pushed you away. I pushed away the one person who has always been there for me. And I'm sorry for that, Mom. I'm trying to do better. I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. I had spent so many years wanting this moment, hoping for some kind of acknowledgement. And now that it was here, I didn't know how to react. I had let go of so much of the anger I once felt, but there was still so much to process. Emily, I said softly, my voice calm. It's not enough to just apologize. We need to be honest with each other. We need to understand what we both need, not just what we think the other person needs. She nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. I know, Mom, I'm willing to do the work. I'm ready to really see you this time. Not just the image of what I want you to be. I want to understand you, what you like, what you need. I want to be there for you, the way you've always been there for me. There was a long silence as I processed her words. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could find a way back to each other, to rebuild the bond that had been fractured over the years. But I also knew that trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired overnight. It would take time, and we would both need to put in the effort. I'm not sure it's going to be easy. Emily, I said slowly, but I'm willing to try. We can't go back to what we were, but maybe we can find a new way to be together. A way that's real, not based on images or expectations, but on understanding. Emily looked at me, her face softening with a mixture of relief and hope. I don't expect everything to be perfect. Mom, I just want a chance to really be your daughter, not just the one who is always playing a part. I reached across the table and took her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch, the connection that had been lost but was now beginning to return. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was a real one. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. I think we can make it work, I said, smiling gently, one step at a time. As Emily left that afternoon, I sat in the quiet of my home, reflecting on the conversation we had just had. It wasn't a grand resolution. It wasn't the fairy tale ending I had once imagined. But it was real, and that was enough. I had spent so many years trying to be what others wanted me to be. But now, for the first time in my life, I was finally learning to be who I truly was, and that was worth more than any image of a perfect family. It had been weeks since Emily's apology, and while the healing process had started, the journey wasn't linear. It was a slow and often painful path, but it was one I had chosen to walk. I spent my days in quiet reflection, continuing the routine I had established for myself. The morning still brought peace, a time of solitude where I could sit with my thoughts, work on my crafts, and slowly, but surely, rebuild the parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of my family's expectations for so long. But no matter how much I tried to distance myself from the past, there were moments when the memories would rush back, those small, seemingly insignificant moments that carried so much weight. And that's when the past would try to reclaim me. One afternoon, I was working on a quilt in the living room when I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. I had been expecting this moment, though I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The doorbell rang, and for a split second, I considered not answering. Maybe I wasn't ready yet. Maybe it would be better to just let things settle for a little longer. But I had made the choice to rebuild, to heal, to open myself to the possibility of reconciliation, even if it meant facing the pain of the past. When I opened the door, Emily was standing there, Noah beside her, holding onto her leg. Her face was softer than the last time I had seen her, but there was an unease in her eyes that wasn't there before. She looked down at Noah, who was tugging at her hand, and then back at me. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. I stepped aside and let them in, motioning for them to sit on the couch. The house felt different with them in it, familiar, but somehow foreign. After all this time, it was as if we were all strangers, trying to find our way back to each other. Emily sat down first, and Noah, ever the curious little boy, sat next to me, his small hands fidgeting with the fabric of the quilt I was working on. For a moment, we all sat in silence, unsure of where to begin. "Mom," Emily said, breaking the silence, "I don't know how to say this, but Harold's health has been getting worse. He's been struggling. I know we've had our differences, but I thought maybe you could visit him. He's asking for you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Harold, my husband of 40 years, the man who had never truly seen me, who had taken me for granted for so long, was asking for me. The same man who had dismissed my needs and ignored my feelings was now calling for me. Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to walk away from the years of hurt, from the way he had treated me. But another part of me, perhaps the part that still remembered the good times, the love we once shared, felt a pang of responsibility. "I don't know, Emily," I said slowly, my voice catching. "I've moved on. You know, I've found peace. I've started living for myself, and I can't just turn back." Emily's eyes filled with understanding, but there was something more there, something that spoke to the deeper tension we had never addressed. "I know, Mom," she said quietly. "I know things between you and Dad haven't been easy, but he's not the same man anymore. He's not the man you married. He's not the man I grew up with. He's different, and he's sorry. He regrets everything. He knows how much he hurt you, and he's asking for a chance to make things right." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I couldn't help but wonder, was this a last-ditch effort to make up for the years of neglect? Was this just another attempt to fix the broken parts of our family? Even if it meant asking me to return to a life I had already left behind, I turned my gaze to Noah, who was still fidgeting with the quilt, oblivious to the weight of the conversation unfolding around him. He looked up at me with those innocent eyes, and for a moment, I saw the little boy I had raised, the one who had once looked to me for comfort and guidance. "I don't know if I can do this, Emily," I said softly, my voice filled with hesitation. "I've spent so many years trying to make things work for everyone else, for him, for you, for the family. But where was I in all of that? Where was my peace, my happiness?" Emily reached out and gently placed her hand over mine. "I know, Mom. And I'm sorry for all the times I didn't see you, for all the times I took you for granted. I can't undo the past, but I want to do better. I want to make things right with you, for both of us, for a moment. I sat in silence, weighing the decision in my mind. What did I owe Harold? What did I owe myself? I had spent so long trying to fix things, to fill roles that never truly fit me. But was it possible to find some kind of closure, some kind of peace? Even in the face of everything that had happened, I'll think about it. Emily, I said, finally meeting her gaze. I can't promise anything, but I'll think about it. Emily smiled, her expression a mixture of relief and gratitude. She didn't push me, didn't try to convince me further. She understood that I needed time, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like Emily was truly listening to me, not just the image of the perfect mother she had created in her mind, but the real me, the one who had suffered, the one who had finally found her voice after they left. I sat in the silence of my home, turning the conversation over and over in my mind. Harold's request weighed heavily on my heart. Part of me still carried the anger, the hurt, the years of being invisible. But another part of me knew that healing wasn't just about moving on. It was about finding closure. It was about letting go of the pain, not for his sake, but for mine. The journey was far from over, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could finally live my truth, free from the past, and finally, free to be the woman I had always wanted to be. When I walked away from everything I had known, from the family, the home, and the life I had spent decades building, it felt like I was shedding a weight I hadn't realized I had been carrying. For years, I had played the part of the perfect wife, mother, and grandmother, silently accepting the role others had assigned to me. But what I came to realize is that we cannot pour from an empty cup. We cannot give to others when we are not honoring our own needs and desires. It took me years to understand that living for others was not the path to true fulfillment. It took me even longer to find the courage to step away from the roles I had been typecast in and embrace the person I had lost along the way. True peace, I discovered, comes when we choose ourselves not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. The greatest lesson I've learned is that it's never too late to reclaim your life. It's never too late to find your voice, to set boundaries, and to pursue your happiness. The people who truly care about you will understand your need for space, and they will respect your decision to live authentically. To those of you who feel stuck, overlooked, or like you've lost sight of who you are, remember this: your happiness matters. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to live a life that nourishes your soul. If my story has resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more insights on how to reclaim your own life and peace. We're in this journey together, and it's time we start living for ourselves.